history of Britain's Asian youth movements. Britain's Asian youth movements sought to overcome the racial discrimination that was rife in the 1970s. In an exclusive gupshup with DESIblitz, Dr. Anandi Ramamurthy aims to educate the British Asian youth of today. Crucial historic events have taught us that in order to build solidarity against oppression, careful organisation is fundamental. In the 1970s, Britain bred a number of Asian youth movements whose sole purpose was to counter the racial discrimination and instances of violent abuse faced by ethnic minorities that routinely took place on its city streets. Originally from India, Dr. Anandi Ramamurthy migrated to Britain in 1977 during the midst of key British Asian youth movements. Anandi speaks about how Asian people today can learn through past events in order to build a better future for everyone.
Sometimes today people feel disillusioned and think they have no power. But one of the things that the youth show us is that when you stand together, you stand tall and you can achieve an awful lot.
The 1970s in Britain acted as a catalyst for an epidemic of overt racism. The economic downturn led to a recession, leaving many people jobless, and the white British community grew increasingly frustrated. They sought a scapegoat to take the brunt of their blame, and so ethnic minority groups became prime targets. Violent racial attacks ensued, like Paki bashing, resulting in a great number of deaths nationwide. The police of this time were notorious for turning a blind eye to such acts of criminality. The Asian population was left feeling let down by the authorities, having to defend their communities by themselves. Today, as we experience yet another recession, it is becoming frighteningly apparent that negative attitudes towards race are resurfacing. The most pivotal point in this historical movement was the racially motivated stabbing of 18-year-old Gurdeep Singh Chagga on the streets of Southall. Outraged by this unlawful attack, the Asian people of Southall took action, creating the first BAME. Bradford was next to adopt the movement, which then later spread to Bolton, Birmingham, Sheffield, and many other cities across Britain, where communities of South Asians lived. The BAME initially began as the Indian Workers' Association. Formed in Coventry in 1938, it was an organisation that fought for Indian independence through anti-racist campaigning. However, in later years, Asian communities opposed the generalization that all Asian people should be categorized as Indian, and therefore BAME became the chosen title. A monthly magazine was produced to help members with such issues as unemployment, racial attacks, and dealing with arrests. Members were predominantly male at first, but that soon changed as more and more Asian women moved to Britain to reunite with their families. Asian women were the most oppressed members of society during this time, often facing eviction had they spoken out against such matters as domestic violence. They began to find the courage to fight back, joining the men in a battle for equality. Anandi also raises the incredibly important question of illegal immigration. Should it be a criminal offence to move and find work to feed your family? Especially today, these blurred lines of inequality must be readdressed to avoid a continuation of racial oppression. Anandi explains.
I believe racism is an expression of power inequalities. It is not an expression of misunderstanding or lack of knowledge.
The launch of BAME came at a time when, although Labour was in government, the far-right National Front Party had claimed the spotlight after rapidly increasing in popularity. Asians were stigmatised routinely as dim-witted and devious, especially within the media in TV sitcoms. British Asians had aspirations to be great professionals, but instead were unfairly faced with lower wages, poor working conditions, and job cuts. The National Front taunted Asians in schools and violently attacked them in their houses by night. In 1976, the NF marched through a primarily Asian part of Bradford, Manningham. To the surprise of the police and the NF, the Asian community were marching too, under the slogan, "Here to stay, here to fight." The youth took to the streets, differing to their parents living in the 50s and 60s who adopted the mentality of turning the other cheek. The youth were prepared to defend themselves against violent attacks. Members of the youth made petrol bombs to defend themselves. Although unused, the police found these and arrested 12, later infamously named the Bradford 12. The support received from the general public, who argued that self-defense is no offense, was immense. Determination and their unwillingness to back down led to an eventual acquittal, all narrowly avoiding life sentences. This event marked a huge turning point in the fight for racial equality in Britain. Anandi's book, Black Star, Britain's Asian Youth Movements, contains interviews of past movement members, along with documents, stories, and biographies. Today's young generation of British Asians are shockingly oblivious to the history and struggle their families had faced. The UK is not yet free from racism, as demonstrated by current racist political parties such as UKIP and BNP. Education is a vital component to allow the legacy of the BAME to continue. It is important to help those facing similar examples of oppression today. If BAME can teach us anything, it is that British Asians should continue to unite and defend their communities against both casual and overt racism. History proves that taking a stand against racism can positively impact society.
DESIblitz.com